What's up, world? It's your boy Eric Estrich coming at you live and direct. Today, I wanted to make a video about the 5 albums that I put out and kind of give you a little bit of detail about each album. The first album that I put out from the catalog is called Track Assassins. That's a collaboration album with Chris and Chad, known as the Smith Boys. We recorded this album on 2118 Mark Trail. It was my first time producing for a group. I did all the beats on that album, and me and the Smith Boys collaborated on about 4 tracks on that album, and they have a couple of solo records on there, and it was just fun making that album, man. We smoked a lot of weed making that album. You know, we were really young, you know, when we made that album, and we recorded that album in my house. I engineered and recorded that album on a Tascam 4-track Porter Studio, and along with my MPC 3000 when I made the beats for that album. And the thing I remember most about that album is just fun, just having fun, you know, being new and coming up with new and creative ideas, and, you know, the whole name of the group being Track Assassins, and us just trying to show that, you know, we were top tier lyricists in the game. And, you know, that was the whole ambition for that album. And it was my first time actually being a solo artist, which I was kind of afraid to do, which is why I wanted to do the collaboration album with the Smith Boys. So it's pretty much the story behind Track Assassins. The next album would be The Grand Opening. The Grand Opening, I also produced. By that time, I was using Triton keyboard made by Chord when I produced that album. And I recorded that album with an engineer named Randy Kreider. And he engineered on Outkast's first album, Southern Playalistic Cadillac Music. And he's a top tier engineer, man. Like, he showed and taught me things, you know, about dumping my music out of the keyboard, and each individual track, you know, being spaced right. And he just taught me a lot about sound, you know, when I made that first album, because I was still making beats, but I had never actually taken my beats to a studio and had to track out each beat, you know, and mix each individual sound down. And he taught me how to do, you know, all of those things on that first album. The biggest thing I remember about making my first real solo record was the pressure. I felt a lot of pressure because, you know, Mo was putting a lot of money into recording that album. I think we were paying about $800 to $1,000 a song on that album. So, and I think it's 10 or 11 records on there, so you could do the math. That's a very expensive album. And I just remember not wanting to let him down. You know, I was putting my all into making that album, and the pressure was coming from me having to do the production and then come up with the song. And, you know, it was my first time really having to learn how to dump my music in the studio. So it was just a lot of pressure on me at that time, you know, when it was making the album. But making the album was still fun. You know, it was a fun experience. I had my homeboy Jaron Benton on that album. I had my mentor Third Ave on that album on Hate Me If You Want To. The song Hate Me If You Want To off that album was in the movie soundtrack for the movie Making Moves by the Bowles Brothers. We sold a lot of records, a lot of CDs of that album. It did well independently, regionally, you know. It was a success in our eyes, and I really enjoyed making that album. The next album we have is Hood Certified. The Hood Certified album was a blast to make. You know, I made that album with Terrence Edwards and Demetrius Williams, known as Ties and OD. And that album is strictly for the streets. You know, when we made that album, we really were out there living that lifestyle. You know, we really were in the trap. We really was doing almost everything that we say on that album. We were actually living that lifestyle. You know what I'm saying? And that was like right after I had got arrested for a drug charge. And I made that whole album while I was on felony probation. when I was making that album. And I believe one of the other guys was also on felony probation. So, and we still, even with that over our heads, we still were living that lifestyle. And, listening back to that album now, just hearing how reckless I was with my freedom, and just, it's kind of cool to hear me back being refreshless and reckless and careless. But me being where I'm at right now, I kind of shake my head like, man, you had a long way to go, when you made that album. But the album is young, carefree, unapologetic. I did the production on that album. I was working with a Motif on that album and a MPC 2000 XL for that album. I worked with producers like my homeboy, Luther. I worked with Cottonmouth on that album. But, fun album to make. It's considered a classic, you know what I'm saying, on the east side of Atlanta, Zone 6. And, for anybody that's into that sound, that street gutter from the bottom type sound, hustling, you will enjoy that album, Hood Certified. The next album we got is called The Green Light. The Green Light album was made right after I made, Hood Certified. So it kind of follows in that same vein. It's not as much, talk about hustling on that album like that. It's more of a fun album. I would say commercially, this was probably my biggest album. It had the single Show You What It Do on there. They got rotation all in the Southeast. I debuted that single on the DJ Smalls mixtape. It had There They Go, which was another anthem for me, that I performed all around the state of Georgia, Alabama, and Florida. It just has a lot of bangers on there. Every song is almost considered to be a single. And that was my goal with that album. That part of my career, I was really trying to get commercial success. I started to think about what type of records I was making and how far I wanted my records to go. So every song on that album, I tried to go big, big sound, big hooks. You know what I'm saying? The production on it. I worked with, a Black Mob group. I worked with, who else did I work with on that album? I worked with Luther again on that album. And, and I did the rest of the production on that album. So very, very, it was kind of an extension of the Hood Certified album. So just that carefree, reckless time, man, where, I was just out there living my life, without a care in the world, before marriage, before a child, just, and listening to that album kind of takes me back to where I was during that, that time in my life. The next album we're going to talk about is Spaceship Music, which was my last album before this MGM album. Spaceship Music is where you start to hear me mature as an artist and as a man. The album has 6 tracks on it, so it's considered an EP. I had clearance issues with 2 tracks off that album that I'll probably just put out for fun on YouTube or Facebook. And one of them was probably the most heartfelt song, but I had to remove 2 records off of that album. So, they reduced it down to about 6 records, which, means it's going to be considered an EP. But out of those 6 songs, man, you get, Spaced Out, which, that video has 40,000 views on YouTube. That was a single off that album. OG Perk, is another single off that album. Fly Away, Spaceship Music. It's just, that album really shows my maturity lyrically, and it's a total departure from everything you have heard before me on the first 4 albums. And it kind of shows you the direction that I was headed in, on that album. On that album, I worked with Desperate Measures. I worked with, Grand Orchestra, which is my company, to make that album. And, I just had fun making that album. I engineered and recorded and mixed that album myself in my home studio. So I think when I'm able to do that, I'm able to make a better product. I think when I'm able to be more hands-on, with my product, as opposed to going to a studio and going in the booth And I actually like to sit in front of the mixing board while the mic is like right here, you know, when I record. So I like to be more intimate when I'm recording, and I'm able to engineer my own voice and do my own punch-ins. And I think my music comes out better when I'm able to do that. And I think the sound of Spaceship music is a prime example of that, you know. And like I said, more importantly, it shows my growth as an artist, and it kind of shows you the direction that I was headed in to making my MGM album. So I just wanted to give you a breakdown on those 5 albums, give you a little backstory on each album, and what the production process was like, the writing process, and the overall direction of those albums. And hopefully you guys have went to my platforms, whether that be Apple Music, Spotify, YouTube, and kind of had a chance to stream through some of those albums. I know it's a lot of music to try to get through, which is my goal, because it gives you, you know, when you're working out or you're on a long drive, you can kind of just dissect and go through this music. And hopefully I'll get some feedback from you guys on which records out of that 5 album run that you're feeling, and also get some feedback on the records that you're feeling off of the MGM album. This is your boy Eric Estridge signing out. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Peace and love. I'm out.